gentlemen, the purpose of this meeting is to present the material that was prepared by Dr. Timothy Cobban from the University of Western Ontario. We've had a long process in trying to get an understanding of the amalgamation, of the outcomes, the review, and originally when I brought that matter up in the election campaign of 2010, I said that tensions remain with regard to the amalgamation, and we have to confront whatever those issues are, and the solutions lie between doing nothing and de-amalgamation, but in that sweep. And so some people got quite concerned about that, and we know that the province of Ontario has stated clearly, the Minister of Municipal Affairs, that restructuring is not on the table, and because there has been a petition from an amalgamated municipality to do just that, and the province's position was stated: you can do all the build-up you want, we will not invest in that, but if you want to make that investment, and it would be quite expensive really to bring that material forward and present it to us, we will consider it. So at the recent Association of Municipalities of Ontario, Minister Jeffrey was meeting, there were about 14 mayors in the office, in the meeting room, and we were asking questions, and I said, I appreciate your clarity on restructuring. That's good, we understand that. But in view of the fact that tensions continue to exist in amalgamated communities, would you consider a review of the effects of amalgamation? And the minister's answer was, well, that's a sneaky way to ask a question, but yes, we would be receptive to reviewing the effects of amalgamation. My search for answers over the past several, it's been about a 2-year process, because we were very busy in 2011. We had the stadium, we had labor issues, we had area rating, we were completing the McMaster project. So toward the end of 2011, I got to meeting with a number of people, including Mark Sproul-Jones from McMaster University, and we did a long, hard examination of what it would take to produce a useful review based on the Hamilton experience. And the answer was that it would take quite a lot. And then we sought assistance from people like the mayor of the day, the chair of the transition board, and there was a reluctance to simply not promote some outcome, but to simply deal with what was the promise, what happened, and what was the outcome. So finally, my search took me to University of Western Ontario, where I met with Andrew Sancton, who is generally regarded as one of the leading municipal experts, especially in the subject of amalgamations. And so we had a very good chat, and it's strange how timing works. He said, well, as a matter of fact, we have just completed such a review. And so I was introduced to Dr. Tim Cobban, our guest today, and his team had dug into the statistics, made some comparisons, and presented what I think is a very useful and informative piece of work. After the presentation, we can discuss where we may go with the information that we have. But we'll just wait for a moment until we're wired up technically. I've seen the presentation. It's quite striking. It's not too long, and I'm sure it will inspire some questions. I'll also make the presentation available to you. I can send you the file.
In about a month.
There we go.
Okay.
So, do we need the lights down? Or are you
Thanks,
good
Bob.
with that? Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Timothy Cobban, University of Western Ontario.
Well, it's my pleasure to be here. Thank you, Bob, for the invitation. So I'm here to talk about some of the work we've done at Western on the effects of amalgamation and the consequences. Grab my laptop. So the main question for us is, what were the effects of the common sense revolution? This is the most sweeping restructuring of municipal government in liberal democratic history. So you cut the size of municipalities by half. And the enunciated goal at the time was to reduce the size of municipal government by reducing overlap and duplication. And if we look at the slides of total municipal government employment, we see from 95, which is when the Harris government came into power, and this dramatic change, this sweeping increase in the size of municipal government over the next 10 years.
Excuse me, Tim.
Yes?
Could I ask you just to stand to the
No,
side
sorry,
and do
sorry.
your presentation? We can't
Okay.
see it.
I'm sorry.
All right, thank you. I appreciate that.
Thank you. Okay. In some ways, the most important slide. So, we see 95, which is when Harris comes into power. We have the dramatic change from the common sense revolution, restructuring, downloading, everything else. And then this rapid increase in the size of municipal government. And so if we look at some basic data, right, we see the overall size of the municipal sector in Ontario, right, 15.8 persons per 1,000 population and employees, compared to all the other provinces, a very large municipal sector. And then by 2010, right, the rapid increase in the size of the municipal sector compared to other provinces. And so in reflecting on the common sense revolution, did it lead to a decrease in municipal government? First, the size of the municipal sector increased rapidly over that period, more than any other province, and it rapidly increased over that 10-year period. And it's not just downloading. So we would think, well, you know, the province downloaded a bunch of responsibilities, but if you compare social services, for example, and you download a responsibility, it only increased by a fairly minor number compared to the previous period. Let's go here. And so, in trying to compare, what you want to do is compare all of the predecessor municipalities. So you look at, you know, Hamilton, Wentworth, all the other municipalities, and then compare them, group their numbers together, and then compare it with a new municipality and see if it in fact decreased municipalities. And so in our work, we've been focusing on full-time equivalents. And FTEs are probably the best measure of the size of the municipal sector. About half of municipal wages are on FTEs. And once you hire someone, it's pretty tough to get rid of them. So we focused on this. And so we have 445 municipalities, right, since amalgamation. That's the new number. And we got rid of every case where there was an annexation, right, because the boundaries change. And so you can't properly compare the predecessor with the new municipality. And then we got rid of every municipality over 3,000 persons. Because the small ones are tricky to analyze. And so this is your main finding. The main finding is, in municipalities that were restructured compared to unrestructured, unamalgamated ones added 3.25 persons per 1,000 population. Compared to non-restructured municipalities here. So the main conclusion is municipalities that were amalgamated added full-time equivalents at about twice the rate, right? 2 times the rate of unstructured municipalities. So if your municipality wasn't amalgamated, then you added on average 1.77 persons per 1,000. And if you were restructured, like Hamilton for example, then you added full-time equivalents at twice the rate. Which, for social science is a pretty strong and robust finding.
Are you taking questions?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so a couple of questions I have for you right now, and I'm going to apologize because I haven't seen the research, so I haven't had an opportunity to do my own research, so I'm asking questions
Sure.
that you probably will find. So firstly, you say that the growth in social services from 3.4 to 7.8 is relatively minor, which is double as a grouping though. And I'm wondering how much of that is related to downloading, because in terms of the amalgamated municipalities, Sudbury, Ottawa, Hamilton, Windsor, there's been a lot of population growth, but they've also overwhelmingly had more downloading of provincial roads, paramedics, public health, and social services than other ones. So how are you balancing that? Is that actually weighed in here? Can I use this as a apples to apples comparison?
Yes, you can. The one weakness here in the data, and I thank you for bringing it up, is if we compare, so we're here, right? So part of the problem is this is provincial data, and so some of these numbers are municipal, other ones, if they're provided by a municipal service manager, whatever the term is, it's not included in that. But the point of bringing this up is to say, well, there was an incredible growth in the municipal sector over this period, and it's not just downloading. It's not even mostly downloading, right? So if you look at downloading, if you look at social services, ambulance, court, security, it doesn't account for even half of it, right? The rest is entirely growth within the municipal sector, and that growth is being driven by amalgamated municipalities.
Okay, and if I may, just make sure that I reported correctly.
Yeah.
So you're saying less than half can be attributed to downloading. How much can be attributed to population growth?
Well, all these numbers that I've reported here those are per capita population growth. So it's included in it already.
Okay,
And
yeah.
for most of Ontario, there wasn't that much population growth outside of Toronto. So
Okay, so specifically to Hamilton, how much less staff do you believe we would have per capita if we hadn't been amalgamated?
That's a good question. $10? No, I'm not sure. Yeah, Hamilton actually does pretty well on the provincial data. Yeah, so let's go with 10. 10.
10 people?
Yeah.
10 less staff.
No, I have no idea. I have no idea if Hamilton wasn't amalgamated. Hamilton's a tricky case. It's in every case where you had a regional government amalgamated with lower and upper tiers together, right? You see some really strong findings until 2005, right? So there's really, really strong pressure on employment and growth up to 2005, which is why I use 2010, because by 2010 they trend back down, right? So Hamilton seems to be, comparing to Sudbury, Thunder Bay, Toronto, Ottawa, sort of middle of the pack for regional governments being amalgamated.
Let me try the question another way.
Yeah, sure.
What's the figure for Hamilton? You've got FTE growth and restructuring municipalities at 3.25. What's the figure for Hamilton?
I'd have to pull that up.
Tim, can I put in
Yeah.
a suggestion? Because
Sure.
some of the material you sent me showed that although some municipalities had increases as much as 70%, I think the Hamilton number was about 22%. Does that sound familiar?
That sounds about right.
Right. So 22% increase in FTEs.
Yeah.
So that, in that case, if it's 22%, Professor, how would you break that down into population growth and downloading? So for example, in Hamilton, Flamborough, for example, Highway 8, part of that was downloaded, part of 5 was downloaded, but we're very fortunate 6 and most of 5. But like I'm trying to get a sense of how much is amalgamation
Sure.
and how much is other things.
No,
because I
that's
don't wanna
the
throw it-
exact question, right? Trying to figure out what was downloading, what was amalgamation, which is why we use the 300 municipalities as a data set. In the case of Hamilton, I'm trying to remember the data. I wonder if I have it here. Well, the answer is I don't know offhand. I do know from looking at things like fire and public works and police that Hamilton was pretty much middle of the road as far as amalgamation and new restructured municipalities went.
Some of that specific data, something we could grab from you at a later date? Or?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I'll send you the full paper.
It's important to know that Tim's review was of all amalgamated groups, so we didn't ask him to do a Hamilton presentation. This is the information that he gathered from all sectors, and there's some that you could easily pull. And the one that I did see was 22% increase in FTEs over non-amalgamated communities versus as high as 70. But I think for our purposes, this is the beginning, and then we can work through those numbers individually for the city of Hamilton. But the most important thing is that this information, and it's a good question from Mr. Coleman about where the information comes from and so on. Our intention is to give it to the province and have them vet that information. And Minister Jeffrey said to me in a public meeting that they would be willing to consider a review of the material. So we needed to have some material to review, and Dr. Cobban's material is what we came up with.
Mr. Mayor, but to what end is the province going to review this? What's the ultimate purpose?
I can't tell you the answer to that. All I can tell you is that there was an openness to accept the notion of reviewing a very prominent top-down imposition of governance. And would seem fairly obvious that after 10 years of having done this, there must be some result, there must be some numbers that you can
Well, it's
access.
the most sweeping restructuring of local government in liberal democratic history, right? And so, for academic reasons, it's important to know what the consequences were, but for policy reasons, because they're still talking about amalgamation and restructuring in some pockets of the province. People are still upset about the new municipalities, so there's both academic and policy reasons for doing this kind of work. Yes.
Councilor Maria Pearson from Stony Creek, one of the amalgamated communities. My question is, on this review that you did it incorporate changes with regards to staffing requirements in conjunction with union requirements, provincial requirements that now mandated you had to have the supervisor
right.
for so many
Yeah, sure,
workers
sure.
and all of that, which would not have changed
No.
pre
Well, and water and
amalgamation,
everything
right?
else that came down. That's the entire point of looking at all municipalities, right? So you can, if you look at the wave of downloading, right, it would affect municipalities that were restructured and ones that weren't.
But
right?
did you
And so-
factor those numbers in as you went along to this 22% in Hamilton? Because there still would have been a percentage increase in the pre-amalgamation days with the communities amalgamated.
Well, the short answer is yes. It's included. It's included in the entire data set as well, right? So you're trying to hold account, right, for all the new provincial responsibilities like ambulance and court and water and everything else. And so if you compare it across 300 municipalities, half that were amalgamated, half that weren't, and you get a really, really strong sense of what the effects of downloading were, independent of restructuring.
Thank you.
Well, when I look at those numbers, it almost seems as if, it says that there are more employees in municipalities that amalgamated. There's been a higher rate, I'm phrasing this question terribly. Can you speculate on why there's been more growth in amalgamated municipalities of employees?
That's a good question. We have a couple of theories. One is that if you're making a new municipality and you're the CAO, then you want to hire a bunch of people around you, right, to do the job that otherwise you'd have to do, right? So that accounts for some of the growth in the center. And then another part of the growth has to be amalgamating different collective bargaining units together, right? So you merge together 3 or 4 fire departments, then they're going to typically harmonize to the highest level of wage, right? So the deputy fire chief is going to get the same amount compared to the other one. So it's both harmonization upward and then probably some, for lack of a better term, rent seeking, which occurs at the highest levels in creating a new municipality. So if I was a CAO and I had to make a new municipality, I would say, well, I want someone to do this and I want someone to do that, and I'm going to hire an intergovernmental relations and then a communication specialist, so I don't have to give this talk, someone else can do that sort of thing. So that seems to be about part of it, but we're still working through the data.
Did you just look at employees, or have you looked at budgets?
I've looked at everything.
Any idea if amalgamation in general has resulted in smaller budgets or more cost savings, or has it been cheaper for us?
Almost universally, no.
And your research, it's been peer reviewed, and which journals has it been published in?
It's in process, but it's been peer reviewed.
Okay, so which journals will it be appearing in?
Canadian Public Administration.
Thank you.
Can you give us an idea of what municipalities, like how many amalgamated municipalities?
We go from 445 So we go from 445, and then we eliminate every case where there's an amalgamation. Sorry. Yeah, thank you. Annexation. Can't eliminate amalgamations. And then we eliminate every municipality with less than 3,000 persons, right? Because some of them are Northern Ontario, they have incredibly large territories, right? And so, you know, the costs are driven by a number of other factors aside from amalgamation. So we end up with 223 municipalities, about half of which are amalgamated, about half of which are.
So the mayor this morning made a comparison to Winnipeg as a comparator city.
Sure.
Near the same population size, a little bit more dense. Now, Winnipeg, a lot of services that we provide municipally are provided by the province there. So there will be a bit of difference there. But excluding the downloaded services from Hamilton, if you took the Hamilton services that are provided municipally here, that are also provided municipally in Winnipeg, how much growth difference is there between the two? Because you had earlier mentioned that Ontario has had more municipal growth than other provinces.
Yeah, no, it's a tough question. Well, Ontario is hard because over the last 15 years, there's been an incredible amount of downloading, new responsibilities dumped onto municipalities. You know, I guess the short answer is I can't give you a firm answer, right?
So if I may rephrase.
Sure.
As a journalist.
One more try. Yeah.
I've got to do a headline.
All right.
What is my headline? What is the headline that is absolutely 100% we know for sure?
Amalgamated municipalities grew at twice the rate in full-time employees.
Because of amalgamation.
It seems to be, yeah.
But I couldn't, so my headline would be amalgamation. It seems to be that amalgamation is causing growth.
Yeah, I think that's fair, yeah. They grew at twice the rate. You can put my name on that, that's fine. All right? I mean, it's a really strong finding in social science, right? That you would find twice the rate of growth comparing unamalgamated to amalgamated municipalities, right? Across the entire province. Every sector from the north to the south to the west, right? It's a really, really strong finding.
What advice would you give the province then in light of these findings?
Don't amalgamate anymore. Stop.
Did you look at the services that we provide? You talk about the Dublin employees. You also need to understand the benchmarking. In Hamilton, for example, it's pretty clear that the fire services we volunteer in the outlying area and full-time and
Yeah, no, sure.
clearly
That's what you expect, right? In amalgamated municipalities, you think that they would go from part-time to full-time. In Parks and Rec, for example, right? They would, and then in fire, they would go from part-time to full-time. It's outside of central government. There really isn't a strong finding. So, for example, if I look at amalgamated municipalities, I don't find that they hire over that 15-year period, more people in Parks and Rec, or more fire, or more police. It's almost entirely within central government expenditures.
Yeah, I think what I'm trying to understand though is that clearly there was a significant void in regards to seamlessness of fire services when pre-existed amalgamation with regional government. And the findings and the recommendations made by the fire chief created a seamless process that provided a fair, more equitable distribution of full-time services to ensure that no one was left behind.
Right. That's entirely possible, and you see that in many cases where municipalities are amalgamated, where the outlying areas say we have to have our response time, we have to have the basic level of services. There's really no way for me to capture that here except on the capital side. But
If I may ask a question to the mayor. Mr. Mayor, based upon your review thus far of amalgamation,
Yeah.
what is your opinion of amalgamation in Hamilton?
Well, my opinion has never changed. We never should have amalgamated. The democratic process seemed to be derailed through that. And the proof of the pudding is that if in Hamilton's case, we have 22% more employees than we would have had we not amalgamated. Costs are picked up in part by the communities who, screaming and crying, did not want any part of this. And so we're at the point where we have to realize that a review such as this points a direction for the province. And the province, first of all, in my opinion, needs to take this material and with their own internal resources, vet it and make sure that it's right. And so then you have to, you have to try to see, for instance, it's very interesting, the main question is, where did all these people come from? And a lot of it is in administration. You know, and I can tell you that the mayor's office, and I made that comment this morning, it's gone from 9 to 4. And the cost of the mayor's office has gone down by about 1/3. Because, you know, it was stated at the time by the chair of the transition board that, well, the mayor needs a driver, and then we got all these people, policy analysts and so on, and well, we're gilding the lily. And so and that's for me to discuss on the only area that I can speak to for sure, because it's very hard to get into the organization, into the various departments, and determine, you know, what the staffing is, where the, you know, the extra bodies may be or not. But it's important for the province to understand what happened when this took place. And it's a fair review for the current government because it wasn't their project. And so there are other amalgamations that I know in the province of Manitoba, they may find this extremely valuable. The reference that I made to Winnipeg was not about amalgamation though today. It was about the fact that they chose not to have bus rapid transit rather than LRTs.
Your statement was that it was a comparable city in density and
Roughly,
size.
you know, if Winnipeg's a bigger city than Hamilton, it's a capital, so
I was
it's,
trying to ask a question of the professor to get at outside of Ontario,
Yeah.
because his statement earlier was that Ontario had seen greater growth. If I may, Mr. Mayor, what is your goal of this process? Why are we here, and what do you hope to achieve by what we're doing?
what we are here for is to explain to the communities that were amalgamated what was the impact.
And if I
And
may,
sorry, Professor, if I may, with the mayor, I'd like to
I'll
ask.
finish. And so, you know, if someone and their taxes go up, right, a couple $100 in a year, then you want to explain to them, was it from, you know, the reassessment of your tax base? Was it from new tax levels, or was it from amalgamation, right? What drove this? So there is an accountability measure that I think is important.
Yes, and I want to get to the mayor though. So what is the goal of this? Is it just an information session and then we're done? Or do you take this information and do something with it
The
to
province-
change something?
Minister Jeffries said that they would consider, and you can't bring nothing forward, you have to bring something forward, a review of amalgamation.
So your goal is to have the minister review it? Is that what you're saying? Or is your
My
something
goal
else?
is to have the province of Ontario review and present to the public amalgamation. The presentation we have today is an academic exercise from a highly regarded and respected organization, the University of Western Ontario, under Andrew Sampton. And when I saw the work, I felt that it was profound and useful. And so here we are today. Now where it goes after today remains to be seen.
Mr. Mayor, back in 2010, you said de-amalgamation is a possible outcome of a review. Do you still believe that?
No, I didn't really say that.
Yes, you did that. You
Well,
said it in the direct quote.
I know what I said, Andrew. And what
I've
I
got the
said
direct
was,
quote, sir.
the survey, a review of amalgamation would, the outcome would be from anywhere from doing nothing to de-amalgamation, right? That was the span of what the response could be in terms of the data that we get. So now we have some data, and now we can determine what to do with it. But the province clearly stated that they were not interested in bringing the restructuring matter forward. And I thank the minister for that. Thank you for making that clear. But that doesn't mean to say that there may be some way of relieving costs that were brought on by the amalgamation process by a further in-depth review by the province. And that, who knows what that means? It may be some direction to municipalities, or it may be a further investigation of downloading in terms of its fairness. So there's lots of things that the province can do.
We're just
Fair
telling
enough.
people why their taxes.
Fair enough.
That's
What I'm
not
asking you
reasonable.
directly is de-amalgamation a dead issue for you or not?
Well, nothing is a dead issue, but it's not an issue. I'm not the mayor of Hamilton to break Hamilton up. I'm the mayor of Hamilton to heal the rifts that divide us. It said it right on my material at that time, and I worked hard to do that. And I've cited on many occasions, at times when council has been divided on issues, with the suburban councillors, and vice versa. So it's not for me to say what will happen or should happen. It's for me to say, let's have an intelligent discussion based on real data.
But you don't want to see the amalgamation at this stage.
What do I want to see or not see? What's the
You're
question?
here to heal the rifts. You no longer want to see the amalgamation occur.
Well, I wouldn't say that. I think Hamilton's a great city, and the amalgamated city has great potential. But I can tell you there are lots of people who are not happy with it. And they continue not to be. And their voices need to be heard. But as to beginning a process that will lead in a change in the structure of the city, I don't believe in my term or our next term that would be possible. Nothing can happen until the province gets serious about reviewing the material. That begins with what we've been able to elicit from Dr. Cobban's work.
Dr. Cobban, just a quick question around timing. This report was released in October. I'm curious, how many other cities have you delivered this report to, and what other conferences has this report been delivered to?
It's been delivered in Montreal and at Western.
At Western, the University of
Yes.
London.
Yeah. London, Ontario, yeah.
Can I just ask, was there any exchange of funds to commission this report? And who's paying for the funds?
Yeah, there's always an
So where's
exchange.
dollars coming from to commission this report?
Hamilton.
Okay. Secondly, how much?
I'd have to check with my consulting company that I use, but
And thirdly, pre-amalgamation, regional government represented 87% of the services provided to the Ohio areas. So I'm trying to understand, amalgamation was just sort of a natural evolution of the fact that the majority of this major services provided to the city of Hamilton, or sorry, to all those communities, were already being delivered through regional government.
sure, in the case of regional governments where they were amalgamated together, that is a strong finding, right? That in the case of Hamilton or Ottawa, that a few services went up, and that was basically it. But there still seems to be, if you look over the 15-year period, a strong growth in employment, basically in the center, in general government, even in that new amalgamated structure.
Then how's that compared to the growth of the community?
It's accounted for, because I count growth per 1,000 persons, right? So I'm always accounting for population.
So could individual communities absorb those infrastructure costs on their own if they were not amalgamated?
Well, sure, right? They could or they couldn't. And I'm agnostic about the findings. I don't know whether this is good or bad that we've hired a whole bunch of municipal employees in amalgamated places compared to unamalgamated ones. Maybe it's good, right? In small townships that now they have a bunch of full-time people who are there, they're working, instead of having one person who's a dog catcher, right, half the day, and then picks up garbage the other half the day. Maybe it's good. So I really don't know.
Well, I guess the point I'm making is as the time hasn't stopped, there's been pretty significant growth in some of these Atlantic communities where they're taking extra water down.
Yeah, no, that's certainly true in suburban areas.
So they're exercising.
But it's such a strong finding when you compare amalgamated ones to unamalgamated ones, right? So everybody grew over this 15-year period. Everyone hired people, but amalgamated ones hired them at twice the rate over a 15-year period. And in social science, that's a really, really strong finding.
Sorry, Sam.
Oh, I was just gonna say, just in terms of, you said funding came from Hamilton, from the study.
This project was not funded by Hamilton.
No,
Okay.
What
I
are you
just wanted
referring
to
to? What are you referring
What are you
to?
referring to?
sorry, what?
What are you referring to then when you said the money?
Well, there's some costs involved in
Yeah.
bringing
Presentation,
Professor here
speaking,
and
and so
making the
on.
presentation.
Mr. Mayor?
This is paid for by West.
So what's the cost of today's event, and how do you break it down between the speaker and the venue? And why did we choose this venue instead of, say, City Hall?
Well, it's a provincial report. It's not a city report, and it will end up in the hands of the province.
But my question is how much are we spending?
I
and
don't
why
know.
are we?
I don't have the answer to that, but I will give you that answer when I have it.
So who commissioned the report? That?
I didn't commission
I didn't
anything.
ask that, I asked who commissioned this report.
No one. This is research by university.
So what was the inertia to do this report? Somehow, somewhere, somebody said we should take a look at amalgamation, how it's working.
No, that's what I do for a living.
He does for
That's
a
my
living.
job. And the mayor had contacted Andy Sankton, who's sort of the dean of social science and local government, and said, who's doing what on amalgamation and restructuring? And then Andy said, well, Tim is, that's me. And so then we had a chat about my work.
That's interesting timing, because the meeting that I had with Dr. Sankton, and he asked me a lot of the questions that are being asked here. What do you expect the outcome will be? Very, very good questions. And I explained to him that the Minister of Municipal Affairs agreed that they would be receptive to consideration of a review. And then Dr. Sankton said, well, it's remarkable that, in fact, our university, Dr. Cobban, is just in the final stages of finishing off the report that, I don't know when you started this, but.
A year and a half ago.
Okay, so
But don't
good timing,
rate that part.
good timing, interesting and important data, and an opportunity for the ministry to report back to the citizens of Ontario and the citizens of Hamilton in terms of what happened, how did it work. And all of us can then consider, because we have to look at these numbers, and because we are reviewing our staffing, we're going into a budget process. We hear all the time around the council chamber about how many people are working for the city, and you put one FTE up there and you're going to get a big argument from members of council. So we need to get a handle on it.
Mr. Mayor, speaking of council, I had 3 councillors come to the media room after I tweeted about this news conference saying they had heard nothing about it. I'm told that it was only at 1:30 that the councillors received an email from you, and you just referenced that this is important information for council. So
Well,
2 questions for you. Allow me to have the questions, please, sir. 1, why wasn't council informed ahead of time? And 2, why is this delegation, this is really a delegation, not being done in the council chambers where...
It's not a Hamilton report, Joy. And
But he's an expert that can help guide council. We have experts come all the time in front of council. So my
This
question
is-
is why
because that's the
council-
decision that I made, and the issue, that's the decision that I made. Also, the State of the City speech occurred this morning, and it's important that that speech stand on its own, because that's different than this. This is a different, and I had some questions this morning about that, and I said, the reporting of the State of the City speech should deal with the material that's contained in, which is the report of the work of the council, the mayor and council together, on what we've achieved and what we think is going to happen. This is a very kind of a gray area because we don't know what the reception is going to be from the province, whether it dead ends here or whether real work comes out of it in terms of the province continuing on with the notion of an amalgamation.
Okay, if I may follow up, Mr. Mayor, you said that you made this decision. I'd like to know why you made the decision not to inform the council until 1:30.
Well, I didn't make the decision not to inform the council. All members of council were invited to the State of the City speech and only some of them came. And so the State of the City speech is quite important and should be of interest to council. But nevertheless, I did, Councillor Whitehead called and asked about that. And I said, it's almost an oversight, but I, you know, distributed the information. And we have who's here is who's here. But it's not a matter, the presentation and the material that Dr. Cobban has put together is not Hamilton-centric. It remains to be seen how this is going to impact us, and that has to do with how the province responds to it.
If I may ask the doctor, Doctor, is good research, and I'm actually really looking forward to spending some time reading your research in depth. In this contract that you have, does it include any future dates in Hamilton or presentations to council or public meetings?
No.
Can I ask, I'm sorry, Mr. Part of the presentation?
Sure.
In your findings, did you look at the benchmarking versus what the growth rate was in the pre-amalgamation period versus the growth rate of those communities post-amalgamation? I'm not talking employees now. I'm talking growth rate in regards to the economy, growth rate in regards to development, and so forth.
Can I ask Councillor Whitehead why, when the material is listed against per thousand population, why that makes a difference?
Well, what makes a difference is if you have a stagnation in regards to the growth pre-amalgamation and post-amalgamation, you have significant growth, then the question is clearly, does the amalgamation contribute to the growth that is?
But the numbers
Sure, well,
compared to no amalgamation.
The basic answer is, did I look at a number of factors that would affect growth? I looked at everything. Right, so we have wages, we have salaries, we have population, we have economic growth, we have building permit data, everything. And so that's how you do it.
But my point is, though, with that growth taking place without the amalgamation versus post-amalgamation, so $1 billion in improvements.
No, the basic question would be, if you had a bunch of municipalities, half amalgamated, half that weren't, right? What happened to those basic questions, right? Population, building permit, economic growth, and so on and so on. And the dominant finding is amalgamated municipalities added employees at twice the rate, and that's it. There's nothing else that accounts for changes over that period.
I wanted to ask you, part of what made amalgamation so painful is that you had a lot of typically small town municipalities being
Sure.
merged with larger urban areas. There was a lot of
Right, the
pain in
Hesplers
regards to
and,
that. Pardon me?
The Hesplers and
Yeah, or like Dundas
Right,
and
sure.
Peterborough. And do you have any sense of, just in terms of winners and like, what has it had a more extreme impact on more small town rural municipalities, or any sense on
Extreme
how
in
they
what
fare?
sense?
Just in terms of
how much they hate the new
well, I mean, yeah,
structure.
that's a given. I mean, in terms of adding employees, any financial impact it's had on those areas. I'm just looking for a kind of general.
Okay. Well, being a bit loose and fast with the data, I think most outlying areas probably benefited. They ended up getting more in services than they paid for in taxes. I think that's probably true for most amalgamated areas. Certainly true for Ottawa. I think it's true for Sudbury. It might be true for Hamilton. And we're waiting on another trove of data, which is coming from public opinion poll. Right? So we're asking people, right, in your Flamborough or in your outlying Ottawa, are you happier? Right? Are services better? Are you getting a good deal? And so on. So we'll have better answers, I think, coming forward. But I think for the most part, suburban and exurban areas and amalgamation probably ended up better off than they think. right? If you actually look at the data and you look at it closely, right? But they're still aggrieved, right? They're still unhappy. They don't like the new structure. They don't care for it.
So you'll have another study then?
Yeah, of course, and that's what we do.
So to the question I think that Councillor Whitehead was asking, I just wanted to go back to, you said non-amalgamated communities, did they grow as fast a pace as amalgamated ones then? Because I think that's the differentiation we're trying to see. There's got to be a reflection to how much growth we've seen in Hamilton with amalgamation, because some of these things would not have gone forward without amalgamation.
Oh, well, I mean, if you think about it, you think about amalgamated places, think of Thunder Bay, Sudbury, even outlying Ottawa areas, right there. The rate of growth, population growth, is not any higher in amalgamated areas than it is in unamalgamated.
But it's not just population growth, it's infrastructure.
Well, you can
improvements,
measure it any
everything.
way you want, but
It's everything, services, exactly.
But that's why you look at 300 municipalities, right? And so you can take into account population growth, economic growth, business
So that's all
growth.
reflected in whatever we'll get as a package that
Yeah.
we can see? Okay, because I'll speak as far as Stony Creek. And I've said it to many. I'll say right now, pre-amalgamation, we had a great community, no doubt about it. We had efficiencies and everything else. There were services that we did not provide for ourselves. We had to purchase from the region. So we were controlled at that level. But I can say without a doubt, in my own ward now, I've had growth of infrastructure upgrades that I would never have seen to this day.
Well, that's
if it had
that's
stayed
true
Stony
for
Creek.
the entire GTA.
Right.
Right.
So we
Outside
have
it,
to remember- we
there's
have to
two
be sure that's
provinces.
reflected.
There's one that's GTA and then one that's not, right? And so that's your
Yeah, it's
basic.
a bad comment for GTA with us right
Sorry,
now, but that's
sorry.
fine. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, do you see this presentation as honoring your 2010 election promise to review amalgamation?
Well, I continue to try to review, as I said earlier, beginning with conversations with McMaster University and structures that could be created to provide the kind of information that's generally provided in this report. And also ran into some obstacles from people who had internal knowledge of the process but who did not want to come forward. So what do? And so I go to the leading expert on municipal affairs, which is the University of Western Ontario, and Dr. Sancton. And then we have our report. So no promise will be kept until the province reviews amalgamation. So I would say on that subject, I have to be held to account, because we're the child of the province. And if they don't do anything about it, and they don't comment, and they don't get back, then we haven't completed that promise, or that discussion that took place in the election campaign. So my hope is that this will incite a reasonable response with meaningful data, and that has to be vetted by the province, and maybe some strategies to see if there's a way to mitigate some of the issues that were created. Because remember, if the increase in FTEs was 22%, let's just use that number. The amalgamated people tend to chip in to pay for that.
You know, I understand all that, but the question is, do you see this as fulfilling your promise, your commitment?
Well, the file has never gone away. It's lengthy. I can take you back to mid to late 2011, and I will not be relieved of the mission until something profound happens with regard to the province. So I'm still working on it.
Do you feel that if you could go back to 2010, would you make the same promise in the same way?
Absolutely.
Fully aware that it's the province, as you're saying.
That's what I said all along, that the province should review what happened. And for whatever reason, there's reluctance, and I don't know why, because it's governments away that did that, and there's no issue for this government to come forward with an honest response to the matter. And certainly, even from an academic point of view, this is important stuff. And when this stuff is published, it's going to be read.
Is this going to be part of your 2014 platform?
I'm not saying anything about platforms. I'm not a candidate right now. I'm the mayor of the city of Hamilton. When the time comes, if I do become a candidate, I'd be happy to answer that question. But right now, I am the mayor of Hamilton, and I'm dealing with issues that relate to our population.
So I understand, are we saying that amalgamation doesn't work? We should put the toothpaste back in the tube and go back to the amalgamated situation? I need to know what to tell my residents what the findings are, so I'm
Are you asking me?
Yes.
Okay. How to summarize it? Amalgamation costs, right? That's the strongest finding, is we've added twice the number of employees in amalgamated municipalities compared to unamalgamated ones. Now, what we don't know, if that's good or bad. Maybe they're getting better services. Maybe they're getting their streets cleared more frequently. They're getting the garbage picked up. I don't know. I can't answer that. So if you want to respond to a constituent, I would say, well, amalgamated municipalities have added employees at twice the rate. And then you have to decide if that's good or fair value.
So did you look at the benchmarking exercise from
Yes,
the province?
of course.
Looked at the levels of services amalgamated cities provide?
Yeah, the data's not very useful, but yes, I've looked at it.
And you're suggesting then that, what I'm hearing now is that there could be different levels of service that justifies a higher level of service that may justify the additional employees in an amalgamated city.
No, I'm saying that amalgamated municipalities added employees at twice the rate. I don't know if those employees are very effective or efficient, or they're doing a good job, or they're performing better services. I don't know. And nothing in the data will tell me that.
Mr. Mayor, how do we get this to council if we're not bringing are we bringing this report to council at some stage, or?
Well, the report will be made available. I'm not bringing a report to council.
How do we get it to the minister?
We're going to...
She's seen it already.
So, Mr. Mayor, are you asking the minister to review this report or not?
I'm asking the minister to consider reviewing the effects of amalgamation. And as a starting point, here's an academic exercise that you can begin with.
So you are
and
asking...
that may even direct them to say, you know what, there's not a lot much here. Or they can say, you know what, we really need to dig into this. So
And,
I don't know how they're going to react to it.
And the province has supplied half the data.
So, Mr. Mayor, as the head of council, are you doing this as the head of council on behalf of council?
I don't know how to answer that, Joe. What's your point?
Well, I'm trying to figure out what the process is here, and is this an official City of Hamilton position asking for a review of amalgamation? I'm trying to figure out exactly what's occurring here, because...
No. The mayor of Hamilton has discovered some remarkable information that relates to Hamilton, but is provincial in its scope. And so the mayor of Hamilton is going to, well, they already have it, is standing beside watching this process take place in hopes that a good result will come back for Hamilton. And there may be a time when the province wishes to bring a report, or council can make some consideration about it. But what we're dealing with here is pure information. It's pure, and it's accessible to the public and council, should they wish to do anything about it. Or if
So
they don't,
what's been your exact communication to the ministry? What have you said to the minister or the ministry?
would you consider a review of amalgamation?
And is that in writing on the letterhead of the office of the mayor of Hamilton?
Mr. Mayor, what would you consider a good result coming back from the province?
A serious response. And that means in terms of, well, we should do that, and we might get around to it someday. I'd like to hear.
But facts.
Yeah.
So, Doctor, if I may,
Yes.
because you're an expert in this area, who would you say are your peers? So if I wanted to call up 3 or 4 professors and try to get a sense of what the consensus is within, sort of go for a second opinion if I
Sure,
may.
right, if you want to.
Who else are
Well, Andrew Stanton is the top in the field.
Yeah,
Bob Young,
and where's he at?
he's at Western too. We're
Okay.
all of us at Western. Myself, Martin Horak, he's a director of our local government program. You can try Neil Bradford at Huron. You can try Mark Sproul Jones before he hung it up. That's pretty good.
Well, we tried that. That's an interesting point because there is sitting dormant at McMaster University the Victor K. Kopp's Chair of Urban Studies, I think. And I had a talk with McMaster about can we, recreate that, get it active again, and there are budgetary constraints. It costs a lot, and I don't think council would request approve, $200,000 a year to do that. So I was left continuing to look, and I talked to Dr. Sproul Jones about that, and we had a good discussion of what it would take to reactivate that, to get it going again. So all of the good expertise seems to be close by at the University of Western Ontario.
So going outside of Western, you go to Congress every year, I would assume?
Yeah, of course.
And at the Congress, who are the people you want to hear speak on these topics?
Mostly my colleagues at Western. Well, I gave this paper, I gave it at the Canadian Public Administration Annual Conference in August in Montreal. So who else is good?
Let's say you have a snowstorm.
Emmanuel Rene Joly, who's at UVic, very good.
Okay.
Who else?
Anyway,
Yeah,
let's get.
I can give you.
Richard, do you have a question?
A quick question, Professor. You mentioned that you've done this quantitative research. It's fantastic. And on top of it, you're going to do some more qualitative research, going out to residents and saying, what is your opinion of the level of service that you're receiving? When is that research going to be done, and will it be done before the election?
Yes, it'll be done before the election. We're in the process right now of dealing with a couple of polling firms, trying to get the data that they have.
And will local communities in Hamilton be part of the polling?
It'll be in the entire province.
And so what you want to do is pair the two pieces of research together so we have a fuller picture.
I want to find out, right, in places where they hired more employees, where taxes went up, expenditures went up, did they get better services?
Yeah.
Were they happy? It's a basic question on quality. Right? It's hard to do this kind of work if you don't know what happened on services, right? So you hire twice as many people,
Right.
but maybe they just did a much better job, right? Delivering services, plowing the roads, picking up the garbage, and so on.
And that's important to know, and I'll just finish because time is getting on. That this pursuing the notion of de-amalgamation. I can tell you that, for instance, in the fight about the quarry, the St. Mary's Quarry, there was a sense that the larger city probably had a more powerful influence on a good outcome for the residents than had they been there alone, or maybe with another amalgamated group. It's hard to say, but it's really important if we attempt to heal the rifts that divide us, is to find that out and find out that, our services have gotten better. That's the exercise isn't to find a bad guy, it's to find the correct path.
Dr. Cobban, just if I can, I'm just going back to the beginning of your presentation and a couple of points that you hit. You
Well,
keep
going
saying
back to
that
the beginning?
right at the beginning, you mentioned, we hit on the fact that you say it's 2 times employment growth, FTEs, 2
Yes.
times since amalgamation. But you said that Hamilton is an anomaly, that we only had a 22% increase.
No, Hamilton's sort of middle of the pack.
Yeah.
I can pull out the data, but it's not. I mean, there's some municipalities that added an incredible amount.
But we
of
didn't
FTEs.
have the 2 times as other maybe communities.
I'd have to pull the data to answer your question.
Okay, but leaving this room today, I want to feel comfortable in knowing that our staff that we've done, we have made efficiencies. We've had growth, but there have been efficiencies in how we've done the growth. And by what you're saying is 22%, it looks like that's there, but you're still questioning that.
Yeah, well, I'd have to look at the data more closely. If you had to have a cutaway, I would say Hamilton added, like all amalgamated municipalities did, but not at the rapacious rate that some municipalities did.
Thank you, appreciate that. And you also said, though, that if we weren't amalgamated, possibly we would have had 10 less full-time. Now, were you being facetious on that? Because you were questioning. I'm
Yeah, I
going
was
back to
probably
it
being
because,
facetious,
I mean,
yeah.
these are little numbers that are sticking here, and I think
Well,
it's
this is,
important to go forward.
this-
Yeah, well, I can't answer
Yeah.
the question if you weren't amalgamated. You are.
Yeah.
So that's,
Just something to that. So if you look at the city of Hamilton, and again, I'm looking at the on-beat because that's the benchmark that the province puts out there.
it's really
I'm trying to
bad
understand.
data, though.
Well, but that's the tool that that's the one tool we have to look at.
Well,
the
no,
services.
there's other data available.
So
You
the
just
point I'm making,
you can use it.
the question I want to ask is, this community of our size, because we've asked this question on the council steady on every service we provide, and consistently our staff have come back and said that we're in the middle of the pack in regards to the staffing levels and even delivery of all those services. So I'm now trying to reconcile how we are in the middle of the pack, and that's amalgamated cities, or non-amalgamated cities, we're in the middle of the pack, which means to me that we're at the norm relative to all levels of services we provide. And yet I'm hearing that we got a 22% increase in staffing as a result of amalgamation. I'm trying to reconcile those two issues.
Is there a question in there?
Well, the question is how to reconcile the fact that we're being told that all the services we provide, we're in the middle of the pack with all our competitors in province of Ontario. And I'm hearing that we have a doubling of staffing since amalgamation.
That is middle of the pack, is doubling.
Okay, so basically we're providing, so even a pre-amalgamated city, a non-amalgamated city, we took a look at their staffing levels relative to the service they provide, and look at our staffing levels relative to the service we provide, they equate.
Sorry, there's a question in there.
Well, I'm asking you, do they equate?
Do they equate?
Are they, is there parity, is there equity?
I'm still not sure of the question. Is Hamilton middle of the pack on services, population, everything else? Yeah, basically. And that's true post-amalgamation.
Okay, we're,
One might, I mean, I'm sure it's not a very big cost, but I'm just wondering how we might find out how much it costs to have this event.
how much what costs?
How much it costs to have this event?
Oh, I'll tell you.
I know it's
I'll
not-
get to it.
I'm sure it's
Yeah.
not a lot, but.
I don't know.
Did it come from your office budget, sir?
Yeah.
Is that where it came from?
Yeah. So anyway, ladies and gentlemen, thank you. And I'll just finish by saying that there were 14 mayors sitting around the AMO table when I put that question to the Minister of Municipal Affairs, and other mayors responded with the same kind of curiosity. So what happens from here remains to be seen, but I do want to thank Dr. Cobban for joining us, and thank you for being here, everyone. And this is probably the opening chapter of an interesting book. Will we have a serious provincial review of amalgamation? Thank you very much.